Welcome to the Fearless Females Voice podcast, where women's stories and experiences are shared in order to empower and inspire others. Before we begin the podcast, I want you to check out my free Stuck to Success quiz, which will help you discover why you're stuck, provide clarity on your next steps, and give you an immediate action plan. It takes less than 5 minutes to complete, and you can find it on my website, www.fearlessfemales.me. On this episode, I am joined by Zarina Khaliq, I call her Nina, who is my old flatmate and an incredible role model. Nina has been working at Google for over 13 years and has built herself such a strong career based on hard work, being curious, and taking calculated risks. Nina started her career doing something that she didn't love at another firm, and she quickly recognized that she was feeling drained and unmotivated. So she made the hard decision to leave that job, which at the time felt like a failure to her. But she turned that failure into a learning and landed herself a job at Google and hasn't looked back since. On this podcast, she talks to us about how she built her career success, how she overcame the blocks along the way, tips and advice on career moves and progression, and how to maintain a positive mindset. I loved speaking to Nina about her inspiring journey. There are so many golden nuggets of information within this episode, and I know you're going to love the listen. So without further ado, let's get stuck in. Nina, thank you so much for joining me on my podcast. So you are my old flatmate and we lived together for how many years? Maybe 2 years or so. So we know each other pretty well. Got to have the pleasure of living with you, hanging out with you. And I remember when I first met you, I was thinking, wow, she's achieved so much. She's a high performer. And I loved your mindset and your mentality. And that's why I want you to talk about that in today's podcast. So firstly, let's begin with, what does being a fearless female mean to you?
Hello, everyone. Hi, Chandni. Thank you for having me. So what does being a fearless female mean to me? I think for me, it's about living with no regrets. And I say this in a very simple way, like living with no regrets, but it's a big statement. It's a pretty big statement when you actually delve deep into it. And for me, I don't want to wake up and say, what if I did this? Or what if I did this? I don't want to look back at my life 20 years from now and say, actually, I wish I had done this. And being a fearless female, to me, is living with no regrets. I think it doesn't come easily. It's about being persistent. I think it's about being resilient. I think it's about being bold enough to take the plunge and to take risks. And I think a lot of us shy away when it comes to making that change because maybe we're afraid of change, or maybe we're worried about what people think about us, or maybe we're not confident in our own ability. So for me, it's about using those building blocks, whatever it is for you, to really be strong when it comes to those points and actually try and make that change, or try and not be afraid of anything that makes you feel positive or feel good about yourself. I think sometimes it could be the smallest things, like, I want to buy that t-shirt, making that decision to buy that t-shirt. It could be, I want to buy that bike, it could be, I want to go on that one date, with this one guy. And we often stop ourselves from doing things because we're so fearful of the unknown, I think, right? And to me, it's about, don't worry about what's in the future. We won't know unless we take the plunge. We won't know unless we take the step forward, right? And that's always been my mindset. What we've always failed if we don't start, right? So I never want to be that person who never starts. And I'm not afraid of failure. In fact, to me, failing and actually getting up and doing it again, right, is actually stronger than never starting. So I've made some pretty simple decisions in my life. I made some really big decisions in my life. Moving country completely. I lived in Pakistan half my life. I then made the decision to kind of go to boarding school in Pakistan. I then moved to England. I went to uni, and then ever since I left uni, I never asked my parents for one bit of pocket money, right? But I think it's because in my mind I had that lack of fear. Maybe it was inherent in the way I was brought up. I thank my parents for that. I think sometimes we're lucky enough that we have parents or a network of people around us that give us that strength at a very young age. And some people don't get that at a young age, right? So I think kind of all of my life experiences have allowed me to actually be where I am today. And what I try and do today is I just try and continue that, and I try and push myself to the next limit and to the next limit. Um, so that is being a fearless female to me. Live with no regrets and always strive for more. Never, like, not to be afraid of what's in the future.
I love that. And you touched a bit on those bold points and the decisions which you've made. And I can totally see you have done that in everything. I know we've talked a bit about in the past your upbringing, even now
Yeah.
moving on to your career, all the decisions that you've made, all the fearful actions or fearless actions that you've made. And
Mhm.
that's helped you to get to where you are today. So
Yeah.
let's talk about a bit about your career. So you've touched on you moved around or you traveled a lot. There were some decisions that you made. You moved to England and you went straight into building yourself a career,
Mhm.
right? So you have, from what I would say, a very
Mhm.
successful career. Having met you, you're very driven, you're ambitious, you keep moving forward, as you say, you've led teams, you've worked your way to senior positions. And I wanted to touch more upon how you built those leadership skills and how you continued on in your career with any kind of challenges or setbacks that you've had.
Yeah. I think a lot of it is about mindset, right? I think there's mindset, there's having a network of people around you, there's the mental attitude. There's a lot of different things that make that, right? But I think for me, it's interesting because I studied a completely different thing to what I'm practicing now, right? And so maybe taking a step back to kind of my from where I came, right? Because I think that adds a lot of perspective. So I actually studied economics and finance. As I briefly mentioned, I was in Pakistan, made the decision, for better or for worse, to leave all my friends behind, my family behind. And I said, you know what, I'm going to do it in England. And I never look back. And I am delighted. I miss it, but I'm delighted with the decisions I made. I could have easily not come, right? But I moved over and I did economics and finance. So in my mind, I was always going to take a job that was economics and finance. I then found myself applying to internships. I was constantly curious. I think curiosity is the way you will learn and you're going to develop and grow. So I think for me, one of the key things is, apart from not being fearless, to constantly keep asking questions and constantly be curious. If you're not curious, that's the one time you stop learning. Some people find a curiosity. Some people find it by going to events or asking people questions. Some people find it by reading books or reading documentaries. However you are, being curiosity is the one thing that is actually going to continue to help us grow as a person, right? But I actually, in my career, I did economics finance. I was curious. I started applying for internships. I did an internship successfully in a place in London in a risk management position in a consulting company. I didn't join that consulting company after I finished. I actually joined PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and I was there for a year. And I think this is a really, really big learning lesson. I think, and this really was a point where I was really, really fearful. And I don't know why. I was fearful because I was fearing failure, and I was fearing giving up and actually changing my direction completely. And I'm so glad I did. So this was the point where uh, I went to PricewaterhouseCoopers. I was doing ACA, accounting and finance, for about 11 months and I was a three-year course, right, in PwC, and I was based in London, and I hated it. Not at the company. I love the people. I love the company. I hated that particular job because it wasn't for me. I'm not an accounting and finance person. I don't like to do debits and credits, and that's just not my thing. It's other people's thing. They're good at it, but it's not my thing. And my friends and family kept looking at me thinking, Zarina, you are so miserable. We've never seen you this miserable in your life. I struggled to wake up motivated and happy. I was more happy by going to a place that I'm meeting the people, but not by the job I was doing. And so I, after lots of thinking, decided to quit that job. And to me, quitting something right at the start of my career, when I've actually done really well at uni, really well in my studies, and then making that decision, Zarina, quit this company, which is an amazing company, which is sponsoring your ACA, like you're based in London, you're working with some amazing clients, to completely change path. And I didn't have a job in mind. I didn't have a job, but I was quitting this place without having a job in mind. So I decided, okay, I'm going to quit. My brother is my mentor. He will always be my mentor. He's amazing. And he said to me, Zarina, you're never going to not have something because we know you got this. We know you've got this. So don't worry about making that decision, even if you don't have your next step. So, and I think often we're so busy doing what we're doing that we never get time to plan for that next step. And that you get you get stuck in that vicious circle. You want to do something, but you don't have time to do it because your current job is too busy and too consuming. So I decided to quit with no job ahead of me at the start of my career at 21. And I felt like a failure. I felt like, why am I giving up, Zarina? Like, why would you do this? Anyway, I picked up, I started doing interviews, and I just interviewed. And I was lucky enough to get a couple of different roles, one which is my existing company, which I'll go to in a second, and one which was a huge company in London, giving me 3 times the salary in a job I didn't feel comfortable with. They were giving me a managerial position because I had come from PricewaterhouseCoopers. They just thought I knew it because I came from PwC, you know. Luckily or unlucky, I didn't take that job because I knew deep inside that it wasn't right for me and I wasn't ready for it. And I didn't want to go into a job and set myself up for failure, right? So I then ended up taking the role I'm in now, which is at Google in Dublin. And I've been with the company for 13 years. And throughout my career, I think the one tip and the one thing that has kept me going has been that whenever I've been bored of one particular thing that I'm doing, I look for more. If it's a project or if it's a particular team, when I feel like I'm not learning, then I move on. And it could be that I move on to a different project, I move on to a different team. And I've been lucky enough to work in 5 different offices in about 6 or 7 different jobs within my career at Google, but I've done different roles in different products within Google. And I've been lucky enough that Google has so many different products to work with. So I was in advertising, then I moved to YouTube. And I've probably worked in 30 different countries, actually visited and worked in 30 different countries, with my base office being 5 different countries. So I think my tip is, when you get bored or when you feel like you're not learning, look for something different. Have an amazing network of people around you and constantly build those relationships, because you'll probably realize you'll find something from those people, or they'll come to you for something without you even looking for it. And if you feel like you're not learning or you're not enjoying, then don't be afraid to end that, you know. And this happened to me multiple times at Google as well, and I've changed many teams with that in mind. um, so I don't know if that answers the question, but I think kind of those are some of the things. I can touch on the setback things as well in a second, but I think that's kind of what has kept me motivated and going within my current role.
I love that, because firstly, having known you, I've never seen you not happy. So the fact that you said you were 11 months into a role and you weren't happy and your friends and family around you could see it. I obviously didn't know you at that time. I can't imagine what you would have been like, because you are so bubbly, so happy, so chatty. And yeah, I just can't imagine. So it's good for you that you took that plunge, because it's funny, when you said your story, I was resonating with it because I was in engineering. And at the point that I wasn't enjoying it, don't get me wrong, I wasn't, the company and the people were great. It was just the role itself. I didn't take the plunge. I was afraid of exactly that. I got into the comfort zone of, oh, the security, the benefits, the pay, everything else that comes with this senior role. And I stayed for those reasons. But actually, it wasn't good for me, for my own mental health, let's say. For me, I wasn't learning anymore. And as you just said, hearing back that tip, that's actually something that really resonated with me, because I wasn't learning and I'm a curious person. So it's really interesting that you said that. And I have the same experience, actually. So it's better that you quit at that age or at that young of an experience rather than staying with it. And exactly. So you made the right decision. What's interesting is you didn't really have the stepping stone into the next place, but you made it work.
I think it's about making conscious decisions. Conscious is the key word here. Not making a decision, but making a conscious decision and actually really evaluating. Because I think being fearless doesn't mean um uh being making unplanned decisions. It doesn't mean jumping with no net below you, right? It means being fearless, but actually taking calculated risks, right? And I think maybe when you're young, you don't have the guts to take those risks because you're too young to know, right? You'd have the guts to play sport and fall off a wall, or jump into like a pool, and you don't care. But when it comes to decisions around your career, or I think those things, sometimes I think as an adult, you actually have to make conscious decisions and make planned decisions, calculated risks, as they say. I'm very good at taking risks, but I always make calculated risks. I'm never going to be completely, what's the word? I can't even think of the word. Careless.
I was just going to say careless. Yeah, I was just going to say careless.
Careless. Because I'm a risk taker, but I'm a very careful risk taker, I think. And I think that really plays to my advantages because I'm not afraid of actually taking that one step, but I'm actually going to evaluate like, what does it mean for me, right? If I'm taking right instead of left, like, why would I take right instead of left? There has to be some advantage for me to taking the right? So yeah, it's a conscious decisions, I think.
Absolutely. And then that's something similar for when I was leaving my job. I did actually, I didn't just leave. I was thinking, right, are my finances in check? Do I have the right support network? Can I live for however long without any source of income? So all these things is the calculated risk which you mentioned. Also, I was thinking it's great that you had your brother as a mentor, because sometimes when you're feeling like you aren't sure of making a decision, don't know how to make the decision, or don't have the faith in yourself, it sounded like for you, your family, especially your brother, who I know you have a strong connection with and strong bond with, he was there saying, actually, I know you can do this, and I know that you will get far. How did that make you feel?
Though, I think I am so lucky to have an amazing network of family and friends, right? And I felt amazing knowing that actually whatever happens, I've got someone looking out for me, right? For everyone, it's different. For me, it was my brother. For some people, they turn to God. For some people, they turn to someone else. Whatever it is that makes you feel like your feet are on the ground and you feel grounded is who or what you should lean towards, right? And for me, I think having parents who were supportive, who were encouraging, and who were liberating. They never said, Zarina, this is the cage you should be in. They said, okay, these are your strengths, right? Play to your strengths. Don't play to the things that you're not very good at. So very, very quickly, I started calculating in my mind, okay, I'm not very good at, I was okay at physics, chemistry, for example, but I wasn't very good at things like biology or, even statistics, even though I went into an economics role. But I started playing towards my strengths, right? And I started focusing more on the things that I was very good at with the support of my brother, who said to me, don't worry, Ari, right? People always make mistakes, but what you got to do is learn from those mistakes, right? Make a mistake. I think there's a saying, right? Make a mistake once and it's okay. Make a mistake twice and it's still okay. Make a mistake 3 times and you're a fool, right? And so I think it's about making those mistakes yourself, but getting up and doing it differently, right? You don't do it again the same way. You do it differently. And I think always knowing that whatever happens, I have that safety net, but also I've got to do it by myself. I've got to do it by myself, and I know I have the ability to do it. So I think I was in a very lucky position, but I'm also very humble and also very conscious that not everyone has that, right? So if you don't have that, look for mentors. Look for people around you can lean on. Like now, I have my brother, yes, of course, but at work, I also have my mentors. I'm very fearless, right? And I use the word fearless. I go to people that I am inspired by, and it's men and women, because I think even as a woman, you can learn a lot from men. You can learn how do men think? What do they care about? How do we interact with them? How do we work well with them, right? And I think having mentors and not being afraid to ask them, can I actually grab an hour in your diary every 6 weeks? Can I actually have lunch with you? Those kind of things. So now I have my family mentors, and I also have external mentors that I work with, not mentors as such, but a network of people that I really trust. But I also have 2 mentors within the company that I lean on very, very often. So I think that's kind of my advice. If you don't have a brother like I do, who is amazing and has that ability to kind of keep me going, find your mentor. Yeah.
I love that. And how important do you think it is that you have a mentor? Because the definition of a mentor is someone who is ahead of the game from where you are, or has more experience than you, and they're able to support your journey. So how important is it that you think that you should get the support from, let's say, a mentor figure, as opposed to someone who's, let's say, on the same level as you or a colleague?
I think both are equally as important, right?
Okay.
Because my mindset is you can always learn something from someone. There's always something you can learn from someone. They don't even have to be your level. They can be junior to you. So having a mentor who has tons of experience is as important as actually learning and spending time with people around you who are maybe the same level or lower than you. Because every time you sit down and have a good conversation with someone, there'll be something you can take away from that conversation, right? And so networking events, whatever you do, right? I think having a mentor is important, right? But it's not a deal breaker. It's important, right? And sometimes it takes time to find the right mentor, right? And the people I have are there like casual mentors. They're not like formal mentors for me, but they're there and they've said, we've got time for you whenever you need it, right? The other day, I was actually honored. Someone reached out to me and said, hey, will you be my mentor within Google? And she reached out to me and said, oh, like, I love your path. I love your career. Is it okay if I actually spend every 6 weeks, take an hour to have, have a chat with you? I want to talk about this, this, and this. She's based in Russia. I was like, of course, like, I'm honored to be able to help you. And I'm honored to be able to, it may not be right, but it's my story and it's my path, right? But that you have to make your own path. And if you can take one bit of information from me and actually be better at what you do, then of course, but vice versa, I'm learning so much from her, right? So I think it's equally as important having a mentor, but also having an equal, right? That you can learn on.
And I
Yeah.
love that beauty of learning and supporting one another, because that's something I don't see enough of women, especially supporting other women, cheering each other on. So it's really nice that you're able to do that and that you're involved in this kind of mentorship scheme or program for yourself. So it's really good that you've taken charge of that. And you touched upon some of the learnings that you've had from the failures. I'm a big advocate of learning from your failures. Can you talk us through any of these learnings?
Yes, yes. I think for me, it's kind of not a misconception. The one thing, honestly, that I have learned throughout my career is know your strengths, right? And to be successful, it doesn't mean that you need to be excellent at everything. You need to be excellent at the one or two things that people can come to you for, and then you build a team of people around you that become successful, right? So I'll give you an example. So when I joined Google, like, I'm very, very good when it comes to relationship skills or influencing skills or people skills. I'm a program manager at Google, not a technical. I'm more of a sales side, business side program manager and strategy, but I'm not overly technical, right? But I know the basics. But when I joined Google, I was trying to learn Java and SQL and C++ and Python and all these things that I just did not come to me inherently. It's like my job at PricewaterhouseCoopers, accounting and finance. I was forcing something that wasn't inherent in me, right? And so when I joined for I was doing these courses and I was enrolling in all, literally everything that was coming my way, I was enrolling into it. And I was trying to be excellent at things that were not natural, right? So my biggest learning, I think, that I would say to people is it takes time and you can't figure it out at once, but find the one or two things that you are excellent at. And my first manager at Google told me, Zarina, you're never going to be successful on your own. The best way you can be successful is to be 200% at your particular thing so that people see you as a specialist in that area, and then build that team that is excellent at everything else. So you then have a team of 5 or 10 people, whatever the case is, and they're each excellent at their own thing. And together you build an amazing team, which, may I say, or dare I say, conquers, but wins together. And that is good in many ways because you can all divide and conquer, but also it's very, very good for mental health and stress levels, because it means you actually have the time to not feel like you've got to do everything. You've not got your fingers in every pot, but you trust that person's got it under control, right? And you do your bit, they do their bit, and you bring it together, right? So not only is it good from a winning perspective, but also from a team and camaraderie perspective, but also for stress levels. I am so relaxed now compared to what I was before when I was trying to do everything. And that's not a winning combination. So you have to have a calm mindset. Yes, stress is important, but too high or too low stress is bad. If you have too low stress, it means you're not thrilled or you're not excelling. And if you have too high stress levels, that we all know leads to all things bad, right? High stress. So that medium stress is super important, I think. That's what a lot of medical people say as well. Medium stress is really, really important. But find the right people that actually make you feel calm, but excel at the same time. So that would be my one biggest thing, I'd say. So now I've stopped doing 10 things. I focus on one or two things and I try and learn. Of course, I try and learn. And also connect to this same point, actually, and it's exactly the same principle. Build relationships, right? I think, and I would say, and I'd like to say, I'm pretty good at this, right? But a learning to me is often I'd go and I'd be in groups and I'd always have something to say. But again, from another manager at Google, he said to me, to be successful, you need to be able to build relationships, but it doesn't come just by chatting about things that you know. You need to learn a little bit about everything, but when it comes to learning, and an example is if you're standing with a group of people and they know a lot about football, it doesn't mean you have to go and learn everything about football, but know enough to be able to contribute to that conversation. So now I read, and I may not be good at rugby, but I know enough about rugby to be able to talk about the players or Wimbledon or, so I think learn a little bit about everything, but don't worry about excelling, because that's important conversationally, but also that's how you build relationships. So that's one thing I try and now do. I spend time learning about other things that I don't know enough about, but just enough, right? Not a lot, but just enough. And I delegate as much as I can to people I trust, and I am okay giving up things. It's important to let go, and I think as you become more senior and more tenured, you realize you have to let go, right? You can't do everything yourself. So yeah, that is my recipe, I think.
It's a great recipe. So I have a couple of questions at the back of that, but as you were just talking about the art of letting go, I have been there in a position where I was leading a team and I struggled with delegation sometimes because I didn't fully trust that the work would get done to the quality that I was expecting. So I used to take stuff on myself. So that's something that I was working on a lot in my previous role. So my question to you is, how did you become so comfortable with delegation, knowing and trusting that your team would deliver to the standards that you expected?
I think it comes with experience and time, right? And I wouldn't say I've got 40 years of experience or anything, but the experience I do have, I think when you start in a career or when you're new in a job, you always want to do everything yourself, right? And it takes time because maybe you don't have that trust element, right? And I think this is where it comes back to the point I previously mentioned, right? I think when you trust the people you work with, I think it's easier to let go of things, right? So I think I've been lucky and unlucky, I suppose, to have teams that I or not full teams, but people that I didn't fully trust, right? And I've been very, very lucky that I've had people that I've worked with that have been very trustworthy, right? So for me, I think that comes with experience, but also you have to think about, in order to scale, you need to be able to let go, right? If you are doing the same thing over and over and over again, you can't scale, right? And that is bad for many reasons, right? Number one, by scaling, it means you can go faster and you can win faster as a team. But also, number two, actually, it allows you to take that next project or to do that next thing or to work yourself up a level, right? So I think in Google, they're always getting us to come from level 5 to 6 to 7 to 8, multiple levels, right? For each level, you have to go one up a level, right? And I think for me, in order to be able to do that, you need to free up time. And how can you just can't make time, right? Time is the most important, is the most, I don't know, is the most limited resource we have. But you can make time, I suppose, by cutting out things that are irrelevant or optimizing time. There's many ways to make time, but you have those 24 hours in a day, right? And you have to sleep for 8 hours, right? Maybe you can cut it to 6, it depends, but you won't be as productive, right? And that's a whole other conversation. Sleep is a whole other thing, right? But the value of sleep, I now realize. But we know we have 24 hours. And how do we optimize that time? To me, I realized with experience, I can only optimize that time if I'm able to delegate and scale. So I think as soon as you realize scalability comes with, either you become technically savvy, like machine learning and AI comes in, right? And you use artificial intelligence to scale and you build programs, that's one option. Or you delegate people and you allow them to become better. But for me, I think one thing, and I did this colors training, which I don't know many if you've done, Chandni. There's multiple trainings you can do. You can do a true colors training. There's another strengths training you can do.
MBTI, Myers-Briggs, all
Yes,
that, yeah.
yeah. So I did a strengths training, and every time I did a strengths training, there was 2 or 3 things that kept coming out, right? For me, it was, my number one is woo, winning others over. And number two was seeing people thrive. And when you fill out the questionnaire, it's not like I planned to fill those answers, but every time my results came out, it said my top strength is winning others over. I like to build relationships and get to know people. And number two, I like to empower people and I like to make them feel successful, right? And actually, it's interesting because as a program manager, I can only win if my people are moving faster or my everyone in the team is pulling their weight, right? And so for me, I get that satisfaction by teaching people and allowing people to grow. So I think that mixed with the fact that that element behind me in my mind, which says, Zarina, you got to scale and you got to move fast. That can only come by delegating, right? And it can only come by teaching people, right? And when they learn, they'll teach someone else and they'll teach someone else, right? It's the concept of an army, right? You can't win on your own, but with an army, you can do a lot, right? That line together is worth a lot more than one person on a horse, right? I think. So for me, it's all about winning together.
I love
Yeah.
that. And you are very clued up on your strengths, I would say. You really know how to thrive and how you can thrive, knowing that you're good at certain things. How did you discover your strengths?
Um, how did I discover my strengths? I think that's a good question. I think, and it's a for me. I think it was a something that people around me kept telling me. Also, I felt the people around me kept telling me, Zarina, you're awesome at this. Zarina, you're really good at this. And I'm like, oh, stop, flattering me, right? But it was interesting because when I started my career, all of my managers would say to me, you are amazing at this one thing or these two things or these. And they always came to influencing, building teams, working together around the kind of the relationship building skills, right? But also kind of empowering people to be better because I love when people actually feel amazing, and I love to bring people with me. If you see me in a room, I like to bring everyone together. I'm not the sort of person who just goes on their way and actually leaves people behind. I'm the sort of person who likes mutual consensus. It doesn't mean everyone has to agree, but I want people to agree as a collectively and then believe in something you're doing, and that's important for a project or anything, right? But for me, I think it was a mix of over time constantly my family would tell me and my managers would tell me. But I think one thing that I constantly I find it difficult now, it's become normal for me, and it's not an easy thing to ask for, but ask people for feedback. And I ask this of my partner, and I ask this from my family, and I ask this from my father, I ask this from my colleagues and my managers. Okay, can you tell me what I suck at? And can you tell me what I'm good at? Right? And vice versa. I'm happy to have a very open conversation with you, right? And I think maybe a personal or a professional space, it's really important to ask for that feedback because how you see yourself is very different to how others see you, right? And so it's really important to, over time, take a step back, reflect, right? We're constantly, especially being in a place like London, we're constantly running round and round in circles and we don't stop and reflect on things. We just don't stop and reflect on ourselves, on our life. Where are we going? Why are we doing it? What are we doing? And I think for me, this reflection on my strengths and all of the advice my managers have given me in the past has really allowed me to say, actually, I know I'm pretty good at this, actually. And I'm okay saying, I know these are my strengths because people have told me and I ask for that feedback. So I hope that answers your question. But also, I am humble enough, I'd say, and I think this is my advice to people, be humble enough to be okay with not being excellent at that other thing. You may want to be super analytical, but maybe that's just not your forte, right? And I'm not technical and I'm totally okay with not being technical. So when I'm approaching someone, I say, okay, like, can we buddy up? Like I'm pretty good at this. If you want something done, I'll get it done. I'm very good at executing. I'm very good at rallying people, building relationships, da da da. But I'm not very good at this technical element, or I'm not very good at programming. Can you help me with this, right? And so ask people is my tip, right? Um, do courses to build on that and be humble enough to actually be okay with not being good at other stuff, right? Because you can't be excellent at everything.
I think that some people sometimes struggle with asking for feedback, but
Yeah.
more so they struggle with actually receiving it and be a bit defensive of it. I've had
Yes.
situations where I've received constructive feedback And
Yeah.
I love it. When someone's giving me feedback, I almost don't even listen to the good stuff. I'm just like, get to the bit where I need to improve so I know what I can do to improve
Yeah.
myself, because it's this whole continuous improvement. I love developing
Yes.
myself, working on myself, and growing as a person. You talk about this earlier on, you talked about curiosity, and it's about
Yes.
asking questions and learning. And for
Yes.
me, when I was younger, it was all about that. I feel like we're very similar, because
Yeah.
I'm such a curious person as well, but more so recently, I've been looking within. So I've been more curious
Yes.
about myself, to understand myself more and ask myself questions. And that's a
Mm.
whole new level of personal development. So
Yes.
I really like the element of feedback. I think it's a great tip that you've just given there. And
Well, feedback is a gift, is what they say, right?
absolutely, yeah, I feel like that's how you can learn and be a better person.
Yes.
Obviously, take it on the chin depending on who's giving it back to you. But yes, I think
Yes.
it's a great part of growing.
Yes.
And you touched on some of the challenges and setbacks that you've had. Can you talk me through any challenge that you faced throughout your journey and how you've
Yeah.
overcome that?
Um, I think the first one I touched on, right, which was kind of doing a complete career shift, right? When I went from PwC to Google, I think that was a setback for me because I thought I'd lost a year of my life doing something. But then now when I think about it, I think actually that was the best decision of my life to do it, because if I hadn't done it, I would have always said, "What if?" Right? What if I had done that accounting job or that career? So for me, I think that was the first setback in my life. But actually, it wasn't a setback. It was an amazing opportunity to say, you know what, I do not like that, and I'm okay. And now I know I'm never going to go into accounting because it's just not my forte, right? And so I think a second one is a second one is actually there were times in my existing career where I was, questioning myself, like, is this really the job I want to be doing, right? And what am I achieving from this, right? And every time I actually had something like that within my career, I actually would look for other roles, right? And I think for me, I don't know if it was a setback as such, but I think um, it's more kind of not maybe getting that promotion as quickly as I thought I would get, right? Not getting that one job. Even within my company, I've actually applied for multiple jobs I haven't gotten, right? So for me, I always felt like it was a setback and I have to start from scratch again, or I haven't got that one promotion, right? So I don't think there's one particular setback, I would say. I think I've had a lot of small setbacks, right? But for me, and I would say one, I think, which is two actually. One personally, when I was actually on a path to a promotion, I did actually get it, but just before my promotion. And I think I probably got that promotion because I was working really hard for that promotion. And it doesn't mean promotion doesn't mean success, but promotion is a nice affirmation on the back of or it's a pat on your back, right? That you've got to the next level, right? But for me, a big setback was, my mom was diagnosed with cancer. Uh, Within a few months she passed away, and um I was completely literally thrown off guard. I just did not expect to see it coming. And for me, it actually put me back quite a bit because mentally I wasn't there for a long time, right after my mom passed away. It just happened so quickly. And I luckily got that promotion I was working towards, but it took me a while to get back on track, right? And actually say, oh, Zarina, pull it together, right? Like, it's a huge setback to actually have my mom pass away and have a huge person in my life who was so influential. And I will actually tell you a quote that my mom gave me. And I have three things I live in my life with, and I'll tell you at the end of this. But that will always stay with me, right? But that setback derailed me for a little bit because I was questioning, do I want to stay within this job? Do I want to actually quit this and actually move to where my dad is living so I can be near my father? Lots of doubts in my mind about, I wish I'd spent more time with my mother, loads of different things, right? But I think once I got over that, and there's multiple ways I helped myself to get over that, right? Then I went back on track, right? To actually say, okay, like, this is what I want to do. I knew there was a job I didn't like, and so I decided to change my job. So actually, maybe a year later, maybe it wasn't even a year, maybe it was maybe half a year later, I started applying for new roles within the company, and I got a new role completely, right? And then with time, I actually kind of kept moving forward, right, with that. So I think that's maybe one of the biggest personal setbacks for me, but it was within my career, and actually that made me question my path, right, and where I was going. But there's so many other small setbacks that I've had, right? But for me, I think the way I've got over these things apart from the network and the family, etc., is to is to is to just sit down and actually evaluate and say, you know what are the few things I need to do to move to the next level? And it's okay to not move so quickly. Take your time to actually emotionally and mentally be ready for what the next step is. But the biggest thing is, and I think part of kind of what I used to do, and I've changed completely, is that as I've gotten older, I've realized for my mental health and my happiness, I need to surround myself with people who empower me and who make me feel more positive, right? I spent so much time with many people, right? And maybe it was my way I try to make those people feel happy. But there's some people who actually need to figure themselves out first. They can't get help from anyone until they make they help themselves, right? And I think I made the physical choice, not physical actually, just I made the choice to start spending more time with people that were adding value to my life. And not in a selfish way, but in a very, very self aware way, right? Like, who are the people who are adding value to my life? And who are the people who actually, they're just, I'm not gaining anything from them. They're not gaining anything from me, right? And so I think those things over time I actually learned, right? So, um, but yeah, I would say that was my setback. But I think there's many ways I kind of thought about how do I overcome those things, right? But yeah.
It's interesting you talked about the people in your life who don't add as much value, because what I found is that the older I've got, the smaller my group has become, because I know
Yes.
exactly what my values are through my own personal development journey. And I would rather interact with friends, family members, whoever they are, who share that, because that's when we're
Yes.
vibing. That's when I feel at my best. That's when I feel that I'm also growing, learning, and really enjoying that relationship, whichever relationship that is. So
Yes.
I
Yes.
found that, and I feel that as you grow older, you are more self-aware, and
Yeah.
you do kind of narrow in or hone in on what
Yeah.
works for you, and you want to look after yourself, right, as well. So this whole
Yes.
self-care, I feel that is just kind of come in as well for you.
100%. I think self-care, and it links back to time, right? We don't have an infinite amount of time. We can make time by optimizing time, but we can't make more time. We can't make more hours in the day. So that optimization of time is exactly this. Like, do I spend that time with that one or two or those people that actually are not adding any value? And I'm probably not adding any value to their life either. Or do I spend time with those people who actually I know are going to excite me or are going to give me that energy, right? And who I can help. Of course, we all have our up and bad down days. Of course, everyone has that. But actually, you need to be able to actually have those sets of people or groups of people, right? Or activities or whatever it is that add value, right? To your life.
And
Yeah,
also
yeah.
the art of saying no, because with that comes your
Yes,
own boundaries. Because when you're
yes,
wanting to, or there's so many things
please.
happening and you're wanting to potentially get involved in so many things, you're thinking, okay, well, do I want to look after myself and I'm number one? And do I want to create that boundary and learn to say no? Or do I just go for it and be in a
Yes,
position where I'm not very comfortable, I'm not enjoying it, but I'm just there for the sake of it? So I think it's really
exactly.
the people pleasing element versus the creating boundaries and looking after yourself, which is your number one.
I agree. I think, there's a fine balance there professionally and personally, right? Because the art of saying no is very, very difficult, right?
Mm.
But you're right. Only then can you make time. It's like people talk about FOMO, right?
Yeah.
And we're missing out and all that. I never had FOMO, right? But I always wanted to be part of a lot of things. But I never really. I said so often I'd be like, I don't want to join. But you know what? I very strategically would pick where I need to be, right? And so if there's that one works afterwards drinks where I know there's going to be people who actually I really need to influence, or they're the people I'm going to be working with for 1 year from now. I may be exhausted, but I'm going to take that 1 hour, even if it's one drink or half an hour, to go and bond with those people, because you don't want
Mm.
to be the spoiled sport either. No one likes a person who never does anything, right? So there's that balance, I think. Pick strategically and tactically, right? I think, the art to being successful professionally, but it doesn't mean that you always have to be everywhere. So there's that balance between being scarce, because being scarce in itself is amazing, right? Because if you're always there, then you're the person who has time for everything, right? And your time is not as valuable as everyone else's. So being scarce, but being available for the right things. And that balance, I think, comes with time. Yeah.
Love it. And just before we wrap up, is there anything else that you'd like to share with the listeners?
Yeah. I think I'd leave with kind of maybe 3 points, right? And I think there are things that I live my life with and keep me motivated, maybe, you know, physically, my exercise, or maybe professionally, whatever. But there's three things, and one of them is what my mom used to say, right? And I love these three things. So if you want to take them, keep it, right? But it's applicable to everything, but more importantly, to I think the fearless females out there, right? Is number one, seize the day or carpe diem, right? Every day I wake up, my motto in life since I was 10 is seize the day. Never let one day go past where you don't feel like you've accomplished one thing or two things, right? Seize the day and make use of the every day. Every day counts, right? That's my first one. Number two is what my mom used to say to me. And I have heard this since I could comprehend, maybe whatever, one or two or whatever. Zarina, if anyone can do it, you can do it better. If anyone can do it, you can do it better, right? And that is where I got my competitive element from, but also my motivation. Well, if Bob can do it, I can do it even better. So I better get up and go, right? And if so and so can do it, I can do it better. That's what my mom taught us, right? That never feel like you're not the same, if not better than anyone else. And this is a really, really important thing, right? And very important for women, especially, who often stop themselves because that one bloke it sounds super confident, but probably they know less than what you do, right? But we stop ourselves from doing so much. So if anyone can do it, you can do it better, right? And number three, live with no regrets, right? Which is what I started with, is that do not look back, a year from now, 2 years from now. And it doesn't mean you drop something today and you quit and then off you go, because you have to have a planned decision. But live your life with no regrets, because you can never reverse time. But what you can do is optimize the future, right? So I think those would be my three things. We can accomplish what we set our mind to, and I think we have to be mentally happy and we have to be physically happy to be our best self. So yeah, so
What a
those are my three.
perfect way to end the podcast. I love those tips. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you so much for coming on this podcast. It was so nice hearing your journey and everything that you've been through to get to where you are now, and sharing so much advice and tips with the listeners.
Thank you so much, Annie, for having me. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Fearless Females Voice podcast. Don't forget, I have a free quiz for you which will help you discover how fearless you are. It identifies where you're being held back in life and will give you some tips at the end on how to improve your mindset and confidence so you are living your best life. You can take the free quiz on my website, www.fearlessfemales.me. Also, I'd love for you to do me a massive favor. If you enjoyed the podcast, then be sure to leave a 5-star review on iTunes. Thank you.